LGBT rulers of the world. Sexuality and gender politics have differed from culture to culture and age to age throughout history. The concept of homosexuality and bisexuality as identities only emerged in the 20th century. Prior to that, gay and lesbian relationships and activities were commonplace, but were thought of more as something one did rather than as part of one's identity. There have been many historic figures who are noted to have preferred their own gender for romance and sex. Here are the stories of 5 rulers from ancient to modern times who were known to have had same-sex love affairs. Alexander the Great. Alexander was the son of King Philip II of Macedonia, another ancient ruler known to have enjoyed the company of men. As a young man, he greatly pleased his father with his strategic intelligence and bravery. The prince was educated by the great philosopher Aristotle. Among the other students educated with him was a young man named Hephaestion. Alexander and Hephaestion became inseparable and likely had a sexual relationship. Their intimate friendship continued on for the rest of their lives, and Hephaestion was often at Alexander's side in battle. When King Philip went to war with Byzantium, he left his 16-year-old son in charge. A group of tribes rose up in rebellion against the teenage prince, but Alexander attacked and drove them out of their territory, repopulated the area with Greeks, and renamed it Alexandropolis. Upon his return, Philip was so impressed that although he had other sons, Alexander was the clear favorite to inherit the throne. And he did at the age of 20, when his father was assassinated. Suspicious that those who had murdered his father would be coming for him next, Alexander put to death a number of courtiers, including a few family members, to ensure his rule would be safe. Recently conquered states, including Athens, suspected that the young king might be weaker than his father, and rose up against him. But they were mistaken, and were quickly suppressed by Alexander and his army. The young king fell in love with Princess Roxana of Bactria and married her. They had one child together, a son named Alexander. The king also continued his relationship with Hephaestion, whom he named commander of the cavalry, second only to Alexander himself. Their relationship was considered a bit unusual by the Greeks, not because they were both men, that was perfectly acceptable, but because they were the same age. Conventional homosexual relationships of the time were strictly between older and younger men. Alexander and Hephaestion once made a pilgrimage to Troy, where together they laid flowers on the tombs of Achilles and Patroclus, famed gay lovers of Antiquity. Once Alexander had secured control over all of Greece, he turned his view eastward to Asia. With his superior military might and strategy, Alexander conquered the Persian Empire. In order to unite the Greek and Persian empires, Alexander took 2 Persian princesses, Statira and Parysetes, as his second and third wives. One of the defeated Persian leaders offered Alexander the gift of a remarkably beautiful eunuch by the name of Begoas. Alexander immediately took the young man as a lover and frequently embraced him in public. This relationship was much more comfortable for the Greeks. When Begoas sat next to Alexander at a feast, the army cheered the couple and demanded that they kiss, which they did enthusiastically. One courtier did call Begoas the king's whore, and Begoas used his influence to have the man's life destroyed. Alexander continued to march his army through the Middle East, Egypt, and Asia, conquering and destroying lands as he went. He often renamed the cities he took in his own honor, which is why the area is littered with Alexandrias and Alexandropolises. Alexander next turned his sights on the Indian subcontinent, where again his army dominated the local population. Alexander had amassed a larger empire than any ruler before him in history. By this time, he hadn't been back to Macedonia in many years, but he continued to demand military reinforcements from his home base. The army had grown tired of constant bloodshed and marching ever further from home. They wanted to return to Greece and began to rebel against the king. Alexander had little choice but to turn around and march home. But the conquest-hungry Alexander took the long way round and continued to beat new lands into submission on the way. En route, his longtime love, Hephaestion, died of fever. The king was devastated and laid for hours on his friend's corpse. He ordered divine honors and funeral rites for Hephaestion and commanded all of his subjects to mourn. Alexander drowned his sorrows in drink, and at the age of 32, at the height of his power, he died, either from binge drinking or perhaps from drinking wine poisoned by his army or one of the countless enemies he had made along the way. After his death, Alexander's first wife, Roxana, ordered the murders of his second and third wives, Statera and Parysates, in order to secure her own son Alexander's ascent to the throne. Alexander was buried in this Alexandria for the next 200 years, but his tomb was such a popular tourist spot and was so frequently damaged that Roman Emperor Septimus Severus had it moved to a secret location. To this day, the final resting place of Alexander the Great is one of history's great mysteries. Emperor Ai of Han. Ai became emperor of the Chinese Han dynasty at the age of 20. The people were initially optimistic about his ascension, as he was intelligent and well-spoken, but he also behaved impulsively and selfishly. Corruption blossomed in his administration, and heavy taxes were levied on the people. Ai was controlled by his grandmother, Consort Fu, and they both became deeply unpopular. Though several Chinese emperors were known to have had homosexual relationships, Ai was the most exuberant. The emperor's eye fell on a minor court official, Dong Xian. Dong rose through the ranks alarmingly fast, and the emperor built a luxurious residence for him and his wife next to the imperial palace. The emperor made Dong's sister a royal consort and member of his harem, ranked just below the empress. The three Dongs were with the emperor nearly constantly. The affair of the two men became known as the Passion of the Cut Sleeve because of a story that after falling asleep in bed together one afternoon, the emperor cut off his sleeve rather than wake his dozing paramour when he had to get up out of bed to attend to royal duty. Dong was created a marquis and then commander of the army, making him one of the three most powerful men in the country under the emperor. Many officials begged Ai not to give so much power to his incompetent lover, but all who protested were demoted or banished. The emperor had tombs built for himself and Dong next to each other, and named Dong his heir. But the emperor died suddenly from illness at the age of 26, and the royal family seized power. Cast out and disgraced, Dong and his wife committed suicide and were buried inside a prison. Caliph Al-Hakam II. Al-Hakam was the Caliph of Cordoba, the southern half of modern-day Spain and Portugal. He was a well-respected scholar and was famous throughout the Muslim world for his wisdom in science, mathematics, and statecraft. He had a massive personal library and commissioned the translation of hundreds of works from Latin and Greek into Arabic. During his reign, he forged a truce with the Catholic kingdoms to the north and ensured peace and prosperity for his people. He commissioned irrigation works to improve agriculture, widened streets, and built markets throughout his kingdom. He was a patron of female mathematician Lubna of Cordoba and physician Abu al-Qasim al-Zahrawi. Al-Hakam was open about his homosexual preferences and kept a male harem. By his mid-40s, Hakam had not produced an heir, and so married concubine Sub of Cordoba, who was beautiful, bright, and analytical. She had been a Christian from Navarre named Aurora, but through unknown circumstances had ended up a slave in the caliph's harem. Sub attracted her husband's attention by dressing as a man, with cropped hair and trousers. Hakam gave her the male pet name Jafar. In the guise of a man, Sub obtained access to the male-dominated royal court, and she was able to amass an unprecedented amount of political power. The couple managed to have a son, Hasham, who was also said to prefer the company of men. Later in life, Hakam suffered a stroke and allowed his wife to take over many of the day-to-day tasks of running the kingdom. Al-Hakam II died at the age of 61. King Gongmin of Goryeo. King Gongmin ruled the kingdom of Goryeo, what is the modern-day Korean peninsula. Goryeo had been a vassal kingdom of the Mongolian Empire since the conquest of Genghis Khan's descendants a century earlier. As was tradition for a possible heir to the throne, Gongmin spent much of his childhood at the Mongolian court and married a Mongolian princess, who later became known as Queen Nongu. When Gongmin ascended the throne at the age of 21, he was allowed to return to his kingdom to rule with Mongolian oversight. But shortly into his reign, the Mongolian Empire began to crumble, and the king took back control of his kingdom by pushing out all the Mongolian aristocrats and military officials. The Mongols attempted a coup, but were defeated. The king instead allied himself with the Ming dynasty of China, whose power was quickly eclipsing that of the Mongols. In his spare time, Gongmin was a talented artist and calligrapher. Gongmin was very close to his wife, Queen Nongu, but they had not conceived a child together. The king was pressured to take a second wife in order to secure the succession, but he refused. He preferred the company of young men in the court, called shoshewi. The names of 5 of his lovers were recorded: Hong Yun, Han An, Quan Qin, Hong Quan, and No Sun. Queen Nongu became pregnant after 15 years of marriage, but she died of complications during the pregnancy. The king was despondent at her death and lost all interest in managing his kingdom. He allowed his advisor, Shin Don, to run the country. A slave girl came forward claiming that her son had been fathered by the king. Gongmin denied that the child was his, but was convinced by his advisors to claim the boy named Yu as his heir, as he was unlikely to father any other children. Freed of political responsibility, the king indulged his sexual desires with abandon. He surrounded himself with attractive young bodyguards and slept with them at his pleasure. Gongmin took a second wife, Queen Sanxian, but was shocked when she became pregnant, possibly because he knew he couldn't be the father. He discovered that she had been having an affair with one of his bodyguards, and he began to plot to have the lover killed. But before he could strike, the bodyguard stole into the king's bedroom and killed him in his sleep. Gongmin was 44. He was succeeded by his illegitimate son, Hugh. Tsar Ferdinand I of Bulgaria. Ferdinand was born and raised in the sophisticated court of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in Vienna. His father was Prince August of Saxe-Coburg, cousin to Queen Victoria of Great Britain and her husband, Prince Albert. His mother, Clementine of Orleans, was the daughter of King Louis-Philippe I of France and a descendant of Philippe I, Duke of Orleans, another royal famous for his appreciation of the male form. As a young man, Ferdinand lusted after women and fathered a number of illegitimate children, whom he supported financially. He entered into a political marriage with Princess Maria Louise of Bourbon-Parma. The couple had 4 children. Maria died in childbirth, and the prince had no interest in remarrying until his mother died. He then remarried primarily to provide his children with a maternal caregiver. His second wife, Princess Eleanor Reiss of Kostritz, held no attraction for him, and he treated her more as a member of the household staff than as a wife. After the Prince of Bulgaria, Alexander of Battenberg, abdicated amid a pro-Russian coup, Ferdinand, then an army officer, was elected prince. Queen Victoria said of her cousin's election, "He is totally unfit, delicate, eccentric, and effeminate, should be stopped at once." Despite his detractors, Ferdinand was a very good leader. He declared Bulgaria independent from the Ottoman Empire and made himself Tsar. Rumors about the Tsar's trysts with soldiers and valets began to circulate, and it was said that he preferred blondes. His rendezvous with various young men on the island of Capri were common knowledge among European aristocrats. Capri has a reputation as a destination for gay men dating back to ancient Roman Emperor Tiberius. The German Emperor Wilhelm II once teased the Tsar about his sexual proclivities and slapped him on the bottom, and Ferdinand was so offended that he refused to grant Germany a valuable arms contract. An embittered former prime minister caused scandal when he gave an interview exploiting Ferdinand's homosexual activities to the public. The Tsar was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Boris III, and he spent the rest of his life in exile in Germany, enjoying his vast fortune. He died at the age of 87. Did I miss your favorite LGBT royal from history? I have many more fascinating royals profiled on my channel. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. If you really want to help, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A link is in the description. Thank you for watching.